The bride pressed her ear to the service door and heard her own name spoken like a threat. Her hand froze on the white silk of her dress. Inside that room, 3 Korean men were deciding her fate. One of them was the man she was about to marry. Her name is Malia Davenport, 25 years old, black, elegant, a rising art curator from Chicago who fell in love with the wrong empire. Today she is supposed to become the wife of Kang Ji-hoon, 32, 6 feet tall, a black dragon tattoo climbing from his neck to behind his ear. The city calls him the Quiet One. Seoul's underworld calls him something worse. She wore his family's white gold around her neck. He wore a 3-piece black suit and the calm of a man who has never lost. And 30 minutes before the ceremony, hidden behind a cracked door in a service corridor, she heard him say she would be the weakest point of his empire. She heard him say no one could let her find out tonight. She missed the 3rd sentence. She walked into that chapel alone. 200 guests, white orchids, cameras, a dress that suddenly weighed more than her body, and a question forming in her throat that no bride is supposed to ask in front of a Korean crime family. But what she did next, in the middle of the vows, in front of his mother, his sister, and every soldier of the Kang clan. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Malia pressed her palm flat against her stomach and held it there until the tremor passed. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The stylist behind her was still fussing with the veil, unaware that the bride had just stopped breathing. "Turn a little to the left, ma'am." Malia turned. The mirror gave her back a woman she almost recognized. Cream silk, small pearl earrings, the gold chain the Kang family had pressed into her hand 2 nights ago, the one Madame Hae-rin had called the only thing in this house older than the money. Malia lowered her hand from her belly before the stylist could see where it had been. "Beautiful," the woman said. Beautiful was not the word Malia needed this morning. She needed steady. She needed a spine that would carry her down a white carpet in front of 200 people who had already decided she did not belong there. The stylist stepped back. 10 minutes, ma'am." "Thank you." The door clicked shut. For the first time since dawn, Malia was alone in the nuptial suite, and the silence was so thick it had a temperature, cold, like the marble under her bare feet. She hadn't put on the shoes yet. She wanted the floor first. She wanted to feel something that wasn't silk. She sat on the edge of the chaise and let her hand return to her stomach. 7 weeks. Give or take a day. Ji-hoon didn't know yet. She had planned to tell him last night, in the private room off the ballroom where they'd rehearsed the vows, but his phone had rung at 11, and his face had done that thing his face did, and by the time he came back the moment was already dead in her mouth. She would tell him tonight. After, when the cameras were off and the guests were counted and the doors were locked from the inside. A knock. 2 soft taps. The rhythm the family used. "Come in, Halmoni." Madame Hae-rin entered without hurry. She was small and old, and dressed in a bége hanbok that made no sound as she crossed the room. She carried a wooden box in her hands, the kind of box that had been in a drawer for 40 years. She set it on the vanity and then, without asking, she took Malia's face in her palms. "Let me look at you." Malia let her look. The old woman's eyes were dark and clean and did not blink. "Your mouth is doing a thing," Hae-rin said. "I'm nervous, Halmoni." "That is not nervous. That is bracing." Malia said nothing. Hae-rin let go of her face and opened the wooden box. Inside, on a folded square of red silk, sat a small jade ring. Not new, not polished. The green had gone almost to gray at the edges. "My mother wore this the day she married my father," the old woman said. "My father was a criminal. My mother knew. She wore it anyway." She pressed the ring into Malia's palm, and closed the fingers around it. Today people are going to say things to you, Heyrin went on. Some to your face, most behind a hand. My daughter-in-law will smile at you like she is calculating your weight in gold. My granddaughter will find a moment to be alone with you. When she does, do not believe her. Malia opened her hand and looked at the jade. Halmoni. Do not believe fragments today, child. What? Fragments. Heyrin tapped Malia's chest with 2 fingers, right over the sternum. A piece of a sentence, a piece of a face, a piece of a phone call heard through a door. Today the house will be full of pieces. Do not build a story out of one. Malia felt her throat tighten. She swallowed it down. Yes, Halmoni. The old woman took her by the shoulders. You are already a king. The paper does not make you one. The paper is only for the tax people. Thank you. Do not thank me. Walk straight. Heyrin kissed her forehead once, quickly, and left the room with the same quiet she had entered by. The wooden box stayed on the vanity. Malia slipped the jade ring onto her right thumb, where it fit, because nothing on this day had fit her ring finger, not even the ring meant for it. She stood, crossed to the window. The salon was on the 22nd floor of a hotel in Gangnam that she still could not pronounce the name of correctly. Down below, black cars were arriving in a slow line. Men in dark coats stood at intervals along the drive that no wedding guest was meant to notice. Do-yoon was down there somewhere, she knew. Ji-hoon's iron hand, the man who never smiled at her and never looked away either. The door opened without a knock. Malia knew who it was before she turned. Oh, look at you. Mireille's voice had that shape that was almost warm and never was. She came in on gold heels, in champagne silk, closing the door behind her with 2 fingers. You really do look like a bride. Mireille, I mean, from certain angles. Come here, let me fix that. Mireille reached, and Malia did not step back, because stepping back would have been the story of this whole week. Mireille's hand moved a single strand of hair behind Malia's ear, slow, precise, the gesture of a woman touching a doll she was about to return to the shelf. There, Mireille said. Better. Thank you. You know I'm happy for you. I know. Mireille smiled. The smile did not reach anywhere. Can I be honest with you, Malia? Between sisters, you can be whatever you want to be. They are never going to call you Mrs. Kang, you know that, right? Not really. To their faces they will. Behind their hands, they will call you the American girl, the pretty American girl, that's all. She tilted her head. That's not cruel. That's just how houses work. I want you to be ready. I don't want you to be surprised later. Malia held her eyes. She did not look at the jade ring on her thumb. She did not put a hand on her belly. She let her spine do the work. I'm not going to fall today, Mireille. Fall? You came here to see if you could tip me over before the ceremony. The answer is no. Something moved in Mireille's face and moved back. She laughed, a small laugh, and it was almost a real one, and that was somehow worse. You are a stronger girl than I thought. Get out. Excuse me? Out? My stylist is coming back. I need to put my shoes on. Mireille looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, and walked to the door. Her hand on the handle, she paused. He is going to break your heart, you know. Out. The door clicked shut. Malia sat down again, because her legs wanted to. She pressed both hands to her stomach this time, and she did not lift them for a long minute. The jade ring pressed cold into her skin. Steady, she told herself. Steady. She stood, walked to the vanity, and put on the shoes. By the time the coordinator came for her, the woman in the mirror looked like a bride again. Malia followed the woman with the earpiece down a hallway with cream carpet and gold sconces, and did not look at anyone she passed. 2 of the men in dark coats fell in behind her without a word. She could hear the salon before she saw it, the soft violin under 100 low conversations, the small clatter of glasses being set down. The coordinator turned a corner and stopped at a service door. "Ma'am, we go through here to reach the antechamber. It's the shortest route. Please, watch your dress on the frame." Malia stepped through. The corridor on the other side was narrower than she expected. Concrete walls painted cream, a line of catering trolleys against one wall. The air smelled like warm bread and the metal of steam trays. Two waitresses in black flattened themselves against the wall when they saw her, and one made a small gasp and covered her mouth. Malia gave them a small nod she hoped looked queenly. She kept walking. 10 paces from the far end of the corridor, there was a side door. It was open by a hand's width. Beyond it, a smaller room, and voices. She recognized the first voice before the words landed. "Ji-hoon." She slowed. She should not have slowed, but her body slowed her, the way bodies do when they hear the person they love using a voice they have never heard them use before. Low, even, precise. The voice he used with his men, and never with her. The coordinator had walked on. The 2 guards had walked on. Nobody was watching her right now. Malia stopped just outside the door, in the shadow of a trolley stacked with folded white napkins. She did not lean in. She just did not walk. "Not a discussion," Ji-hoon was saying. "You do it the way I told you to do it." Another voice. Do-yoon understood. She is going to be the weakest point of this empire from today onward. If they want to move against me, they will move through her. Everyone in this room understands that. Malia's hand went to her stomach without her permission. Weakest point. She felt the room behind her tilt for a half-second. She put her free hand on the wall. "So nobody," Ji-hoon went on, "and I mean nobody, lets her find out everything tonight. Not the arrangement with the Choi family, not the Busan pipeline, not the 2 names on the guest list who—" The words dropped a level, and she lost the 3rd sentence. She heard the shape of it, a rise, a fall, an instruction, but the specific words fell through a gap in the door, into the smaller room, and did not come out to her. Someone in the smaller room said, "Yes, sir." Someone else said something in Korean that she was not fast enough to catch. Do-yoon, sir. On her at all times, from the moment she walks into that salon until she is in the car after. On her, not near her, on her. Sir. Malia was already moving. She did not know when her legs had started, but they were carrying her past the trolley and down the corridor and through the far door before her mind had finished folding what she had heard. Weakest point. Do not let her find out. The camera would have shown, if there had been a camera in that smaller room, and there was not, 2 men in dark suits standing near the coffee service, listening to Ji-hoon with the wrong kind of attention. Han Jun-woo, graphite lapels, calm face. Lee Tae-min beside him, the small hole in his ear where a Brinco Antigo had once sat. Neither man's boutonniere was quite the same shade as the other guests' boutonnieres. Neither man was on the guest list under his real name. When Ji-hoon turned to leave the room, both of them made small motions with their hands that were not the motions of guests. A microphone pressed, a cuff adjusted over an earpiece, a phone slid deeper into a jacket pocket. Malia knew none of this yet. She stepped out of the service corridor into the antechamber, and her coordinator was already there, mouth open to scold her for lagging, and then the coordinator saw her face and closed the mouth. "Ma'am, are you—" "I'm fine." "Ma'am, you are very pale. Do you need to—" "I'm fine." The bouquet was pressed into her hands. Someone smoothed the veil down her back. Someone else lifted the train off the floor. Malia felt these hands touching her the way she would have felt hands touching a mannequin, through cloth, through distance, through the ringing that had started in her ears. She looked down at the flowers, white roses, white peonies, a small sprig of something green she did not know the name of. Her thumb, without instruction, moved to the jade ring and turned it once around her thumb. "Do not believe fragments today, child." Halmoni had said that. Halmoni had said that an hour ago, in a voice that had known. Malia lifted her chin. "Ma'am, we open the doors in 20 seconds. On my count, please walk on the beat. 1 step per 2 counts of the music. Do not rush. The Kang family walks slowly." "Understood. Deep breath, ma'am." Malia took the breath. She did not let it out until the doors began to move. The salon opened in front of her like a mouth. 200 faces turned. The music, which had been a soft violin, swelled to a soft violin with more violins under it. Somewhere near the front, on the aisle side, an older woman in black silk, who could only be Kang Sun Mi, did not turn to look at her. That, more than anything Mireille had said, told Malia what the day was going to cost. She took the first step. The aisle was long. She counted, in her head, to keep her feet honest. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. She kept her eyes on the altar, because the altar was the only place in the room where a man was waiting for her and not looking through her. Ji-hoon. He was already turned toward the aisle. He had been turned toward the aisle before the doors opened, she realized. His shoulders were set for her, not for the officiant. His face did the thing it did in public. Blank. Composed. The face of a man who had trained the face. And then, 3 steps into her walk, that face broke. It broke very small. A tightening at the corners of the eyes. A shift in the jaw. Nobody in the room would have caught it. Malia caught it, because she had spent 9 months learning that face. He had seen something in her face across 100 feet of white carpet and 200 wedding guests, and whatever he had seen had cut through the trained composure like a wire. He knew she knew something. He did not know what. Malia kept walking. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Her hand on the flowers did not tremble because she had ordered it not to. Halmoni was in the second row. Halmoni's eyes on her did not leave her for a single step. Malia did not look at Halmoni because Halmoni's eyes would have undone her. Weakest point of the empire. Do not let her find out tonight. The words rearranged themselves inside her head with every step. First, they meant one thing. Then, 3 steps later, they meant another. He was ashamed of her. He had married her because a boss needed a wife, and any wife would do, and she happened to be the wife who had said yes. He had told his men to keep her stupid, to keep her outside, to keep her decorative. Her stomach, under the silk, was carrying a child that he had already decided to keep on the outside of the real house. She reached the altar. Ji-hoon put out his hand. She placed hers in it. His fingers closed around hers, and she felt, at the base of his thumb where nobody would see, a small tremor that she had never in her life felt in his hand before. "You're pale," he said, low, under the music. "I'm fine." "You are not fine." "Later." "Malia." "Later." Ji-hoon. The officiant stepped forward. Ji-hoon did not let go of her hand. Somewhere in the 4th row, on the bride's side that was mostly not her side, Mireille smiled at a guest, and the guest smiled back. Neither of the 2 men near the aisle in graphite and navy smiled. They watched Malia the way you watch a door you are about to open. Malia did not know their faces yet. She would in 11 minutes. The officiant began to speak. Malia let the words flow past her, because her whole body was doing one thing, which was keeping her upright, and there was no room left for language. Her free hand, hidden inside the bouquet, closed around the stems of the white roses hard enough to bend them. She felt one of the thorns catch her palm through the wrap of ribbon, and she welcomed it. Pain in the hand was cleaner than the fog in the head. She would walk out of this altar in one piece. She had promised herself that in the mirror an hour ago, and she was going to keep the promise. Whatever he had said in that back room, whatever he had ordered Do-yoon to do, whatever the 2 names on the guest list were, she was going to stand here and hear the vows. She was going to say the words. She was going to sign the paper. And then, In the private room after, before anyone got to touch her arm, before Sunmi could kiss the air near her cheek, before Mireille could hand her a champagne glass she would not drink, she was going to look Kang Ji-hoon in the eye and ask him, in the voice she had not used with him yet, what exactly it was that his wife was not supposed to find out tonight. The officiant paused, and Ji-hoon's grip on her hand tightened by a fraction, and Malia understood, without turning her head, that he was not looking at her anymore. He was looking at the two men in the fourth row, and the tremor at the base of his thumb had gotten worse. He was looking at the two men in the fourth row. She could not see his face from where she stood, but she knew the geometry of his shoulders well enough to read it. The right shoulder had dropped a quarter inch. That was the shoulder that dropped when he was calculating a body's weight before deciding what to do with it. Malia stepped back from the arch of the doorway. The photographer was still adjusting the aperture on his camera, still asking her to tilt her chin. She tilted her chin. She smiled the smile that had been decided for her at 7 in the morning by a woman she had never met before yesterday. The photographer thanked her and moved on to the flower girls. Madame He-rin appeared at her elbow. The old woman did not touch her. She simply stood close enough that the sleeve of the hanbok grazed the seam of the wedding dress. "You are pale," Madame He-rin said in Korean. "I am hungry." "You are lying." Malia looked down at the small woman. The jade earrings caught a piece of the chandelier light and threw it back at the ceiling. Madame He-rin's eyes did not blink. "I need water," Malia said. "You need 3 minutes alone. There is a room behind the kitchen. Turn left after the coffee station. Nobody will follow you if I stand at the door." Malia opened her mouth to say she did not need it. She closed it again. She nodded once. She crossed the hall with the veil folded over her arm to keep it off the marble. 2 waiters parted for her without being asked. A cousin of Ji-hoon's, a boy of 19 with a bruise on his jaw that had been powdered over, bowed as she passed. He did not lift his eyes. The bruise was 2 days old. She catalogued that without meaning to. The service corridor was narrower than the hall, lined with rolling carts of gold-rimmed plates. A single bulb hung over a swinging door. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was a pantry. Shelves of dry goods. A stainless sink. A small window high on the wall that had been painted shut. She set the veil down on the counter and put both hands flat against the metal to steady herself. The tremor she had been carrying since dawn found her fingers. She did not cry. She had promised her mother, 3,000 miles away in a house on a lake in Georgia, that she would not cry today. Her mother had said, "You are marrying the son of a man who owns half of Seoul. Don't give the room your salt." Her mother had not asked what half of Seoul her father-in-law owned. Malia had been grateful for that. She closed her eyes and put her palm on the flat plane below her navel. 9 weeks. The size of a green olive, according to the pamphlet the doctor had handed her in Los Angeles. She had eaten a green olive that night to see what she was carrying. It had tasted like brine and rosemary. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, a man was laughing. A voice she knew. She lifted her head. There was a second door in the pantry. It opened onto a smaller service alcove that fed the private lounge on the east side of the ballroom, the room Ji-hoon had been given for his men. She had walked past it that morning and heard nothing. Now the door stood ajar by 2 inches. Someone had propped it with a folded napkin so it would not latch. Someone had wanted a listening seam. Malia looked at the napkin for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, and she put her ear closer to the crack. His voice was low, the kind of low he used when he was giving orders he did not want repeated. There was another man with him, Do-yoon, and a third voice she did not know, older, respectful. "By the vows," Ji-hoon was saying, "not before. If we move before, the guests will scatter and we lose the room. And after, Do-yoon. After, we take them out through the kitchen. Quietly, the bride does not see it. The bride." Not Malia, the bride. She pressed her palm harder against the door. She's going to be the weak point of the empire, Ji-hoon said. The words landed inside her like a coin dropped down a well. She heard them fall. She heard them keep falling. She doesn't know, said the older voice. She won't know tonight. His voice sharpened. Do you hear me? Nobody can let her find out everything tonight. Not one word to her. Not one look. And after tonight, there was a silence. She could hear him breathing. She could hear the small click his throat made when he swallowed something that was not liquid. After tonight, a cart rolled past in the outer corridor, metal wheels on tile, a waiter shouting for someone to lift the ice bucket. The rest of the sentence disappeared under the noise. She stood there with her ear against the wood and heard nothing more but the ringing in her own head. She stepped back from the door, her knees held. She had been raised by a woman who had taught her that knees were a choice. She made the choice. The napkin was still folded in the hinge. She looked at it. Someone in that room had wanted her to hear this, or someone in that room had wanted somebody else to hear it. She could not yet tell which. She turned. She picked up the veil from the counter. She smoothed it once against her forearm. She walked out of the pantry. Madame Heyrin was where she had said she would be, in the mouth of the corridor, hands folded in front of her belt. Her eyes moved over Malia's face with the speed of a woman who had been reading faces for 70 years. You heard something, Madame Heyrin said. I heard water in the pipes. Malia, grandmother. She used the word for the first time. She had rehearsed it twice in her hotel room the night before, and each time, it had felt like a costume. It did not feel like a costume now. Grandmother, I need you to walk me back to the hall. I need you to walk on my left side, and I need you to keep speaking to me the whole way, about anything, so I don't have to look at anyone. The old woman studied her one heartbeat more. Then she slid her small hand into the crook of Malia's elbow. When I was your age, Madame Heyrin began, in Korean, in a conversational voice, I broke a teapot on my mother-in-law's foot. Malia let the words carry her forward. They passed the coffee station. They passed the cousin with the powdered bruise, who bowed again. They passed a woman in a lilac dress who had been paid to cry at the ceremony and who was practicing her tears against the back of a spoon. They reached the antechamber where the veil was to be lowered. 2 attendants stepped forward with the veil. Malia lifted her chin so they could pin it. She watched the ceiling while they worked. The ceiling had a small crack in the plaster, shaped like the state of Florida. She will be the weak point of the empire. She said it inside her head in his voice, in his low register, in his careful English. She turned it over the way you turn a stone in your hand to find the flat side. If she was the weak point, then he was going to make her weak. That was how the arithmetic worked in the world he came from. She had understood this on the flight over. She had understood it every time his mother had spoken to her only in Korean, and then smiled at Malia's polite blankness, as if the blankness were a moral failure. She had understood it in the way Mireille, at the rehearsal dinner, had leaned across the table and said, in perfect English, "It must be so lonely to marry into a family that doesn't have your word for love." She had thought all of that was the price. She had decided to pay it because the man who slept next to her when he thought she was asleep would sometimes put his hand flat against her back and hold it there for a full minute before he moved away. That minute had been her proof. She had built a whole yes on that minute. Now the minute did not weigh what it had weighed. Nobody can let her find out everything tonight. Everything. Not something. Everything. Grandmother, she said. She kept her voice low so the attendants could not hear over the pinning. What does he protect me from? Madame Heyrin's hand tightened on her elbow. She did not look up. From the things he cannot stop being. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have that does not put a knife in your hand today. The attendants finished. They stepped back. The veil hung over Malia's face, and the world went white and soft at the edges. She turned toward the double doors. Beyond them was the aisle. Beyond the aisle was the altar. Beyond the altar was a man she had known for 11 months and married once, in Los Angeles, in a private civil ceremony her mother had witnessed, before she had ever set foot in this city. This ceremony was for the family. The family was the empire. The empire had a weak point now. That weak point was walking toward the door. The music started. She did not move. Madame Hayrin looked up at her from beside her waist. The old woman waited. She did not hurry her. She did not squeeze her hand. She waited the way a person waits at a train platform when they know the train is not late. Malia put her palm flat against her stomach through the seam of the dress. 9 weeks. Green olive, brine and rosemary. She thought about the men in the 4th row. She had seen them without seeing them, on the way to the pantry. One in graphite gray, one in navy, both with the small pocket squares of the invited guests, both with the wrong stillness in their shoulders. She had noticed the stillness, and then chosen not to notice it. She noticed it now. Ji-hoon had seen them. Ji-hoon had counted them. Ji-hoon had already sent an instruction down the line about them. The bride does not see it. She almost smiled behind the veil. She did not, because the veil was thin, and Madame Hayrin was watching. She had already seen it. She took the first step. The dress moved with her. The veil moved with her. The doors opened, and the whole ballroom exhaled at once, and 800 faces turned toward her at the far end of the white runner. She walked. Somewhere in the 4th row on the aisle, a man in graphite gray touched the cuff of his shirt with the tip of his thumb. It was not a nervous gesture, it was a calibration. She did not look at him directly, but she saw the movement in the peripheral edge of her vision, and she named it, a signal to somebody else in the room. She kept walking. Do-yoon stood at the 2nd pillar on the right, hands clasped, jaw stone. His eyes tracked her 1 beat, and then flicked to the 4th row on the aisle, then back. Then to the 4th row on the other side. She saw the geometry of his attention and understood, in the length of that half-breath, that he was standing there because Ji-hoon had put him there, not to watch her, to watch the men who were watching her. She kept walking. Sunmi sat in the 1st row, spine straight, hands folded, the vermilion mouth held in the shape of a woman receiving a gift she had specifically not asked for. She looked at Malia's stomach for a fraction of a second, and then away. Malia felt the look land and register. Sunmi did not know, not yet. But Sunmi was checking the seam of the dress the way a woman checks a rival's story for cracks. Malia kept walking. Mireille sat behind her mother, in champagne silk, cheek turned 3 degrees away from the aisle. She was not looking at the bride. She was looking at a man in the 5th row on the far side. He did not look back. He was looking at the door Malia had just come through. Then he lowered his eyes to his lap. Then he raised them again to the arch above the altar and smiled at nothing. Malia saw the whole triangle in one glance and did not name it yet. She stored it. She reached the altar. Ji-hoon was already there. He was not looking at his mother. He was not looking at the officiant. He was looking at her face behind the veil, at the shape of her mouth through the fabric, and whatever he saw there made his right shoulder drop another 1/4 inch. He had known her face for 11 months. He knew what her mouth looked like on Wednesday morning, on Sunday night, on the flight home from her father's funeral. He was reading it now the way a man reads a letter he has been dreading. His eyes moved from her mouth to her hands. Her hands were at her sides. The left hand was flat against her thigh through the silk. The right hand was making a small movement none of the guests could see. The tip of her thumb was pressing hard into the pad of her index finger, over and over, in the rhythm she used when she was counting something. He knew the rhythm. He had asked her about it once, in bed, in the dark, and she had told him it was how she had gotten through her first surgery as a resident. She counted to 12, and then to 12 again, and then to 12 again, until the shaking in her hands went below the surface, where nobody else could see it. He saw her counting to 12 now. His jaw shifted, not visibly, not to anyone in the room except her. A muscle in the hinge below his ear tightened for 1 second and then let go. He knew she had heard something. He did not yet know what. The officiant welcomed the room. His voice was warm and rehearsed. He spoke in Korean first, and then in English for the American guests, of whom there were 7, all seated in the 3rd row. Malia's mother was not among them. Malia's mother had refused to come. Malia had told the story that her mother's back was too fragile for the flight. Ji-hoon had not asked further. That silence, too, she had built a yes on. She looked at her almost husband through the white gauze. She did not look away. She will be the weak point of the empire. The officiant reached the passage about the joining of families. Ji-hoon lifted his hand a half-inch from his side, palm turned toward her, an invitation to be closer. She stepped closer. Her thumb kept counting against her fingertip. His eyes did not leave hers. 12, 12, 12. The officiant asked for the vows. The officiant asked for the vows. And for the first time that morning, Malia realized her hands were not shaking. They should have been. 2 hours ago, she had heard a sentence through a service door that had cut her open, and the body should have caught up by now. It hadn't. The body was doing something else. The body was standing very still in the middle of a room full of people who had come to watch her either belong or not belong. Ji-hoon lifted his card first. He did not open it immediately. He held it against his thigh for a beat longer than the ceremony wanted him to. Malia saw the delay. Everyone saw the delay. A cough somewhere near the back row cut itself short. "Read yours first," he said. "Read yours first." Low, only for her. She heard it anyway. She heard everything now. That was the problem with a service door, and a sentence like the one she had heard. Every sound afterward arrived sharper than it should. "No," she said. "Same volume, same private frequency. No, you." He accepted it. He unfolded the card with 2 fingers, the way he did everything, and the paper barely made a sound. He looked at his own writing. He looked at her. He put the card down on the small table beside them, without reading a single line. "I wrote something last night," he said. His voice found the room now, not just her. "I'm not going to say it." Madame Kang Hae-rin, in the front row in her beige hanbok, closed her eyes for a second. Not distress, recognition. The old woman had raised him. She knew what he did when he decided to stop performing. Sunmi shifted in her seat. The clutch on her lap moved a half-inch to the right. Mireille, 1 row back with the champagne dress bright as a warning, went completely motionless. Malia noticed the stillness, the way you notice a bird that stops singing. "I wrote it because I thought you deserved a version of me that could stand here and be beautiful about this," Ji-hoon said. "You don't. You deserve the version that tells the truth." The room had been quiet already. It became something else. It became the quiet of 100 people who had stopped breathing at the same time. Malia felt the ring on her finger. She had not put it there yet. Ji-hoon had not put it there yet. It was still in the small satin box in Do-yoon's inside pocket, waiting. She felt it anyway. She felt the weight of a thing that was still 6 meters away. "I have been trying," he said, "for 6 months, to figure out what to call you." The Korean side of the room understood the sentence differently than the 2 black women in the 3rd row who had flown in from Atlanta. Both understandings landed. Both understandings hurt. "I don't mean your name," Ji-hoon said. "I know your name. I mean what you are to me. I'm not good at this word." Malia felt the ventre under the silk. The hand did not move. She had trained the hand not to move for weeks. The hand obeyed. "You are the only person I have ever chosen," he said. "Everything else in my life was inherited. My name, my house, my work, my enemies, my mother's opinions about who I marry. A small dry laugh moved through the room and died fast. Sunmi did not turn her head. You, Ji-hoon said. I chose. He stopped. The officiant, an old man in a dark robe, waited without moving. He had done this for the Kang family for 40 years. He knew when not to fill silence. Malia opened her mouth. What came out was not what she had planned. Are you marrying me because you love me? She said. Or because you're afraid of losing me as a piece of your power? Marrying. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The sentence had been sitting in her chest since the service corridor, and she had thought she would swallow it, and she did not. Do-yoon, 2 steps behind the altar, did not react. Do-yoon's job was not to react to sentences. His job was to watch the room. His eyes were on the 3rd arch, left side, where a man in a graphite suit had been standing with his left hand not quite still. The room waited for Ji-hoon to flinch. He did not flinch. He did something worse. He looked at her the way a man looks at someone who has just handed him the exact question he was hoping she would not have to ask. Not surprised. Sorry. Yes, he said. 1 word. She felt her knees remember they were knees. Yes to which one? She said. Yes to both, he said. And I owe you the second one first. Behind her, the veil moved a half-inch in a draft that shouldn't have existed. A door somewhere had been opened and closed by someone who wanted to check angles. Do-yoon's jaw shifted by a millimeter. Ji-hoon's eyes went past her for a fraction of a second, found what he was looking for, and came back. Do-yoon, Ji-hoon said. Not loud, just clear. Do-yoon stepped forward 1 step. In this family, that step meant a thing. 3 men against the far wall, in dark suits nobody had introduced, adjusted their weight. One of them touched his ear. Malia did not turn to look. She kept her eyes on Ji-hoon. She had learned, in 6 months of being loved by a man like this, that turning to look at what he was arranging was a way to become part of the arrangement. She refused. Keep going, she said to him. Quiet, almost tender. Answer me. He answered her. 3 hours ago, Ji-hoon said, and now the whole room heard. I found out that 2 men are in this hall right now, with an order to take you alive, before the end of the ceremony. He said it flat. He said it the way a doctor names a diagnosis he has already decided how to treat. Somewhere in the 2nd row, a woman inhaled and covered it with a cough. Madame Hae-rin did not move. Mireille's champagne dress, from the corner of Malia's vision, went a shade paler than the fabric could possibly go. That is why I have been in the corridor twice this morning, Ji-hoon said. That is why my men have been where you noticed them and where you didn't. That is why I said what I said behind the service door about you being the weakest point in an empire. He paused. He looked at her the way he had never looked at her before, without the shield. I said it, he said, because a man across a table from me an hour before you walked into that corridor said he knew exactly how to make me kneel. And when he said it, he said your name. And when I heard your name in his mouth, I understood, for the first time in my life, what my grandmother meant when she told me that the day I found a real weakness would be the day I finally had something worth defending. Madame Hae-rin, in the front row, opened her eyes. Malia felt the floor under the white heels. It was a marble floor, and it had not moved. Something else had moved. You heard me through the door, Ji-hoon said. It was not a question. Part of it, she said. Which part? The weak point, she said. The order that no one could let me find out tonight. You missed the 3rd sentence. I know. I said, she doesn't get touched. That was the 3rd sentence. That was the order. She held the card in her hand. She had forgotten she was holding it. She felt the corner of it press into her palm. Say it again, she said. She doesn't get touched, he said. Not by them. Not by anyone in this building. Not by my mother's people. Not by my sister's people. Not by mine. Nobody puts a hand on her tonight. Behind her, the veil moved again. A different draft. A different door. Do-yoon's eyes had not left the third arch. He lifted his left hand 1/4 of an inch and dropped it. Somewhere in the back, the man with the graphite suit felt a body settle behind his left shoulder that had not been there 30 seconds before. I need you to keep looking at me, Ji-hoon said to Malia. I need the room to look at us. I need what happens next to happen without a sound. Malia looked at him. Malia kept looking at him. Malia understood, in a way that arrived slower than she wanted, that the ceremony had never been the ceremony. The ceremony had been the frame Ji-hoon had built to keep her upright in a room full of knives, while his men peeled 2 of those knives away from her back. She felt the ventra under the silk. This time the hand moved. It moved 1/2 an inch, a habit she had trained herself out of for weeks, and she let it. Ji-hoon's eyes went to the hand and came back to her eyes and stayed there. He had noticed the habit weeks ago. He had never said. He had not been sure until now. Mireille, 2 rows back, saw where his eyes had gone. Mireille saw it and understood it in a second, and her mouth did the smallest, tightest thing. Do-yoon spoke into his sleeve for 1 word. He got a word back. He nodded, exactly once, at Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon breathed out through the nose. The men are being escorted, Ji-hoon said, only to her now. His voice had gone back down to the private frequency. They will not know they have been escorted until they are already in a car that is not theirs. Nobody in this room needs to see it. Your mother saw, Malia said. Because her mother had seen, Sunmi's spine had gone straight 15 seconds ago and had stayed there. My mother saw the moment I said your name in my grandmother's sentence, Ji-hoon said. That is what she saw. That is a different problem, and it is my problem, not yours. It's mine too, Malia said. He allowed it. He did not argue. He nodded once. The officiant, still patient, still 40 years old at this, cleared his throat gently. It was a professional throat clearing. It meant, I am ready to continue whenever you are, and I have not heard a single word. Ji-hoon raised a finger. 1 more moment. The officiant lowered his eyes. I need you to hear something else, Ji-hoon said to Malia. You asked me if I'm marrying you because I love you, or because I'm afraid of losing you as a piece of my power. I owe you the answer, and I owe it to you before the officiant asks another thing. Then answer. You are not a piece of my power, he said. You are the reason I have started giving pieces of my power away. She felt the sentence land somewhere below her ribcage, somewhere near where the hand had been. For 6 months, he said, I have been dismantling the parts of this life that would ever put a man in a graphite suit in a hall like this, on a day like today. I have been slow. I have been careful. I have been slower than you deserved. But I have been doing it. Do-yoon knows. My grandmother knows. My mother suspects and hates me for it. My sister. He did not finish the sentence about his sister. He looked past Malia for 1 instant, past Mireille, past the champagne dress, past everything, and came back. My sister will find out today, he said. Behind them, 3 rows back, Mireille's hand went to her clutch and did not move for a long second. She did not open it. She did not need to. She had already sent what she had needed to send an hour ago. So I need you to understand, Ji-hoon said, that when I say I chose you, I don't mean I picked you out of a room. I mean I have been rebuilding the room. Malia felt her mouth try to smile and refuse to. This was not a smiling sentence. It was a sentence that made the eyes hot and the mouth still. You should have told me, she said. I know. 6 months. I know. You let me stand in a corridor and think you were about to kill me. I did not know you were in the corridor until you were already walking down that carpet. You would have told me tonight? I would have told you tonight, in the suite, after the last guest left. I had a plan for how. I had a card. I had a sentence. I had rehearsed it in front of my grandmother yesterday. Madame Rin, front row, closed her eyes again. Confirmation. The card is bad, Ji-hoon said. The card was going to be bad. I know it was going to be bad. That is why I put it down. Malia looked at the small table where his card was lying face down. She looked at it long enough that she saw Do-yoon, without moving, register that she was looking at it. Do-yoon did not move to protect the card. Do-yoon understood which things needed protecting today. Pick it up, she said. Now? Now. He picked it up. He unfolded it. He read the first line to himself. His jaw moved. Read it, she said, out loud, bad card and all. He read it out loud. He read it in the same flat voice he had used to name the diagnosis. Malia, I am a man who has been given power he did not earn, an empire he did not build, and enemies he did not choose. I have been trained since I was 7 to protect all 3. Today I marry a woman I was not supposed to want, and by marrying her, I make her a target for every enemy I did not choose. I am sorry. I will spend the rest of my life making sure that the cost of loving me does not fall on you. This is my vow. Not the ring, not the ceremony. This. He stopped. He folded the card back the way it had been. The room, which had been trained by 100 years of Kang weddings to know exactly when to breathe and exactly when to applaud, did not do either. The silence had a texture now. It was the texture of 100 people understanding that they had been permitted inside something they had not been invited to. Malia felt the tears come and did not blink them back. She let them sit. She had earned them. She would decide later what to do about the makeup. That's a good card, she said. Quiet, not for the room. It's a bad card, he said. Also quiet. It's a good card, she said again. It just wasn't finished. He waited. Add a line, she said. Now? Now. He looked at her. He waited. He was not a man who was used to being told what to write. He was going to be a man who got used to it. Say the line, she said. Tell me the line. She said the line quietly enough that only he and the officiant heard it. The officiant, 40 years in, and pretending not to have heard anything all morning, allowed his mouth the smallest twitch. Ji-hoon did not write the line down. He did not need to. He turned the card back toward the room and said the whole card again, and at the end, where the card had ended before, he added it. And on the day I finally learned to say it plainly, I will not have to be given the words by her. But today I do, and today she is the reason I say them at all. He looked up. He looked at Malia, not at his mother, not at his sister, not at the men against the far wall who were now 3 fewer than they had been at the start of the sentence. At her. Now, he said, you ask me your question again, and I will answer it in one word this time. Malia held the folded card he had put back on the table. She held it because she needed something to hold. She held it and she asked, Are you marrying me for love? She said, or for power? Behind her, the door at the far end of the hall opened without a sound and closed again. Do-yoon breathed out. The men against the far wall were now 2 fewer. The graphite suit was no longer in the room. Nobody at any of the tables would ever be able to say when he had left. Ji-hoon looked at her. He opened his mouth to answer. And in the second row, Mireille Kang, in the champagne dress that had been chosen by her mother for exactly this photograph, stood up. Mireille did not sit back down. She lifted the crystal glass in her hand, as if she were about to offer a toast, and the movement caught the light of the chandeliers and threw a small white flare across the front rows. Every camera in the room found her, every phone, every pair of eyes trained to know where the money in a Kang wedding was standing. Malia saw it too. She saw it from the altar, over Ji-hoon's shoulder, past the priest's arm. "Before the vows," Mireille said, "may the sister of the groom say one thing to the bride." The priest hesitated. He was a small man in white robes, and he had never officiated for a family like this one. He looked at Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon did not look back. Ji-hoon looked at Mireille. For half a second, his face went to a place Malia had never seen. Not anger, something older. A door closing inside a house that had been quiet for a long time. "Speak," he said. The word arrived flat, and it landed on the room like a coin dropped on marble. Mireille smiled. She kept her chin high. The champagne dress caught the light again as she turned toward Malia, and Malia understood, in the way a body understands weather before the sky does, that whatever came next had been written weeks ago in a room she had never been invited into. "To the woman my brother is marrying today," Mireille raised the glass 1 more inch. "May you learn quickly what our family is, and may you love him enough to survive knowing it." She held the pose. Then she drank. She sat down. The silence that followed was not the silence of a hall waiting for a wedding. It was the silence of a hall that had just been informed, in a language it recognized, that a war had a face now. Sun-mi in the front row placed her fingers along the edge of her clutch. Madame Hei-rin in the other front row did not move at all, and her stillness was the loudest thing in the building. Ji-hoon's jaw set. He turned his shoulders back toward Malia and the priest, and the tall white flowers, and the 2 rings on the small velvet tray, and for 1 second, 1 clean second, Malia saw the man she had chosen. Not the boss, not the son, the man. He took her hand. His hand was warm. She did not expect that. She had expected his hand to be as cold as everything else in this hall, as cold as the sentence she had heard through the service door. "She's going to be the weakest point of the empire." And instead, his palm was warm and a little damp along the base of the thumb, and the small human fact of that dampness moved something in her chest she did not have a name for. The priest cleared his throat. He read the opening lines of the ceremony in Korean, then in English, in the plain and slightly rehearsed way of a man who had memorized this only yesterday. Malia understood 1 word in 3, and it did not matter. She knew what part came next. The vows. Ji-hoon spoke first. He did not use the paper. His hand let go of hers just long enough for him to reach into the inside pocket of the black 3-piece jacket, take out the folded square of cream paper the family had written for him, and set it on the altar table without opening it. The gesture was small. Every person in the front 3 rows saw it. Mireille saw it. Sun-mi saw it. Do-yoon, standing along the side wall in his black suit with the silver pin, saw it, and his shoulders shifted a fraction of a centimeter. Ji-hoon looked at Malia. He spoke in English. "There have been a lot of people in my life," he said, "and I have chosen none of them." He paused. "My name, my father, my work, my house, the men who stand along that wall." A small motion of his chin toward Do-yoon. "None of that I chose. It was given to me, and I carried it, because there was no one else to carry it." The room was very still. "You," he said, "are the only person I have ever chosen for real." He said it low, the way a man says a thing he has practiced only inside his own head. Malia felt the sentence hit her ribs, and behind the sentence, at exactly the same instant, she felt the corridor come back. She's going to be the weakest point of the empire. And the 2 sentences met inside her body and refused to fit together. He was still speaking. "I do not know how to be soft," he said. "I do not know how to be a man who comes home at 7. I know how to keep you safe. I know how to keep a promise. Everything else I will learn." He stopped. The priest waited. The room waited. Malia unfolded the paper in her own hand. She had written her vows 2 nights ago in a hotel room in Gangnam, sitting on the edge of a bed, with her free hand resting on the small curve just under her navel, that no one in this hall except her grandmother-in-law-to-be knew about yet. The vows were beautiful. They were the vows of a woman marrying a man. They did not belong to this hall. She folded the paper back. She placed it on the altar table beside his. She looked up at Ji-hoon. "I have a question," she said. The priest's mouth opened a small distance. He closed it. Ji-hoon did not blink. "I need to ask it here," she said. Her voice was low. It did not shake. She had not decided, walking down the aisle, that she would do this. She had decided it 3 seconds ago, when his hand was warm. "Because if I ask it later, I will never know if the answer was true." "Ask," Ji-hoon said. She held his eyes. "Are you marrying me because you love me?" she said. "Or because you are afraid of losing me as a piece of your power?" The sentence went into the room like a stone into a still pond. The first ring of it hit the front row. Sunmi's face did a small, quick thing, a tightening at the corners of the mouth, and then it went back to its arranged calm. The second ring hit the middle rows, and Malia saw a woman in a lavender dress cover her mouth with the back of a gloved hand. The third ring hit the back rows, where the men in dark suits stood against the wall pretending to be guests, and among them, she saw one man in graphite gray and one man in navy blue lean an inch closer to each other and speak, and one of them touched his sleeve. She saw it. She was not supposed to see it. But she had spent all her life reading rooms where the wrong hand at the wrong table meant the difference between a good tip and being followed to her car, and her eyes caught the sleeve touch and filed it, without a name, in the same drawer where the corridor sentence lived. Ji-hoon saw where her eyes had gone. His face did not change. He turned his own head, 1 slow degree, toward Do-yoon. Do-yoon was already looking. Do-yoon had been looking at the man in graphite gray for 2 full minutes. Their eyes met across the length of the hall, and Ji-hoon lifted the 2 smallest fingers of his left hand off Malia's palm and pressed them lightly against her wrist, twice. Do-yoon nodded once. The nod was so small that Malia was the only person in the room, besides the man giving it and the man receiving it, who saw it happen. Do-yoon slid backward along the wall. 2 men in dark suits along the same wall slid backward with him. They moved the way water moves along a floor when a glass has just been tipped, and no one in the seated crowd noticed. Ji-hoon turned back to Malia. He did not answer her question. He answered a different one. "You heard something today," he said. He said it soft. He said it in English. The priest, hearing English, did not intervene. Sunmi, in the front row, went absolutely still. Madame Hayrin's mouth moved, just at the corners, in a shape that on any other woman would have been the beginning of a smile. "Yes," Malia said. "How much?" 2 sentences. "Which 2? She held his eyes. She said them. She said them low, but she said them clean, because there was no way to walk back through this room without walking through the corridor first. She's going to be the weakest point of the empire. No one can let her find out everything tonight." Ji-hoon closed his eyes. For 1 second. When he opened them, he was not angry. He was tired. There was a 3rd sentence, he said. Her heart did the thing it had been doing since 10 in the morning. It stopped once, and then went twice as fast. "Tell me." He glanced at the priest, who was pretending very hard to be a lamp. Ji-hoon spoke lower. "The 3rd sentence was an order," he said. "The order was that no man in this house is to leave your side today, tonight, or any night for the next 6 months, without permission from me personally." She heard it. She heard the shape of it. She heard how it fit into the 2 sentences she already had, and how the whole 3-part thing looked, once it was assembled, nothing like what she had been carrying in her chest since the corridor. "An order to protect me," she said. "Yes." "From what?" Ji-hoon looked past her shoulder now, past the priest, toward the back of the hall, where the man in graphite gray and the man in navy blue were still sitting. He looked at them the way a man looks at a wall he is going to have to move. "From the two men," he said, sitting in row 11 on the aisle. Malia did not turn. She had spent her whole life learning not to turn when the danger wanted her to. "Since when did you know?" she said. 3 hours. 3 hours. I was going to tell you tonight. After the ring. After the door was locked and there were 4 of my men on the other side of it." She breathed out. It was not a sigh. It was the sound a body makes when it has been holding a wrong shape for 8 hours and is finally allowed to change. "Ji-hoon," she said. "Yes. Finish the vow." His face did not move, but something behind his face moved. A small door somewhere inside the man opened 1 inch wider than it had been open when he had walked to the altar. "I was marrying you because I love you," he said. "I did not want to say it in front of them, because I did not want them to know it was a weakness. Now they know. It does not matter. I love you. That is the vow. Everything after that is the small print." He said it in the same low voice he had used for the corridor sentence. She heard it in the same body. The whole hall heard it too. The whole hall, which had spent the last 90 seconds trying to understand what was being said at the altar in English between the bride and the groom, understood the last 5 words without needing to speak the language. "I love you. That is the vow." The shape of those words is the same in every language a room like this contains. Somebody in the middle rows made a small sound. Malia did not look for who. She reached for the small velvet tray on the altar and picked up the ring that was hers to give. It was a plain gold band, not diamonds, not the Kang family stone, a plain gold band that Ji-hoon had asked for himself 3 weeks ago in a workshop in Insadong and had refused to explain to his mother. She took his left hand. She slid the band onto his finger. Then she leaned an inch closer. She spoke against the side of his jaw, so soft that only he could hear it. "Row 11 aisle," she said. "I saw the sleeve." His whole body went still. Then it went warm. Then he took her by the shoulders, gently, the way a man handles a thing he has decided is his to protect for the rest of his life, and he kissed her forehead, not her mouth, not yet, and he said, against her hairline, "You are going to be the most dangerous person in this family before the year is out." She almost laughed. She did not. She had one more thing to do. She turned her head, only her head, not her body, and she looked toward the second row, where Mireille Kang, in the champagne dress that had been chosen for exactly this photograph, was sitting with the empty crystal glass still in her hand. Malia looked at her. Mireille looked back. For the first time since the elevator that morning, Mireille's smile did not fit her face. Malia held the look for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned her head back to the priest, took Ji-hoon's hand more firmly in hers, and said, in a voice that carried without being loud, "You may continue, Father." The priest exhaled once. He picked up where he had left off. He read the Korean lines and then the English lines, and Malia said the words she was supposed to say, and she said them in English, and she said them slowly, so that every single person in the room who had ever doubted that she belonged at this altar had time to hear every syllable of yes. Along the side wall, Do-yoon slid back into position. Behind him now, standing very quietly 1 row behind the man in graphite gray and 1 row behind the man in navy blue, were 4 men in identical black suits with identical silver pins. They were not looking at the altar. They were looking at the 2 seated men. They stood so close that their knees touched the backs of the seated men's chairs, and the seated men, without turning, without moving, felt the 2 chairs behind them go warm, with a body heat that had not been there 90 seconds ago. The man in graphite gray drew a slow breath. He did not touch his sleeve again. At the altar, the priest asked the last question. Ji-hoon said yes in Korean. Malia said yes in English. They exchanged the rings. The kiss was short. It was almost formal. His mouth touched hers for 3 seconds and no more, and in those 3 seconds, every camera in the hall fired at once, and somewhere in the front row, Sun-mi did a very small thing with her mouth that only her mother-in-law, 4 seats away, understood. Madame Hae-rin did not look at her daughter-in-law. She looked at Malia, and when Malia broke the kiss and turned her face to the room, hand still in Ji-hoon's, ring bright on her finger, Madame Hae-rin bowed her head to her, once, low, in the way a grandmother of a house bows to a queen the house did not know it had chosen. The applause started. It started in the back rows, from the men who worked for Ji-hoon and understood, without needing to be told, that something had shifted in the geometry of the room. It moved forward, row by row, and by the time it reached the front row where Sun-mi and Mireille were sitting, it was loud enough that neither of them could refuse to join it without the cameras catching the refusal. They joined it. They joined it late. Malia felt Ji-hoon's fingers tighten around hers. "Walk with me," he said, under the applause. "Slow. Do not look at row 11 when we pass. Do not look at Mireille. Look only at the door at the end." She nodded once. They stepped down from the altar. They walked the aisle they had walked separately an hour ago, and they walked it together now, and the 2 men in row 11 on the aisle did not stand up when they passed, and did not look up when they passed. And behind those 2 men, the 4 men in black suits stood exactly where they were standing, and the space between the aisle and the row was so quiet that Malia heard, as she went by, one of the 2 seated men swallow. She did not turn her head. She looked at the door at the end of the hall. Ji-hoon leaned an inch toward her ear, just once, just as they cleared the last row. "3 hours ago," he said low, "I found out that 2 men are in this room right now, under orders to take you alive." She kept walking. Her hand did not tighten in his. Her step did not break. But somewhere under the white silk of the dress, along the base of her spine, the floor of the hall she was walking on shifted, 1 degree, into a shape she had not been standing on a minute ago. It was not the floor of a woman who had been humiliated at her own wedding. It was not the floor of a woman who had married a man she could not trust. It was the floor of a woman who had, in the middle of her own vows, in front of 300 people, asked the only question that mattered, and had heard the answer that would change the rest of her life. She reached the door. She stepped through it. Behind her, inside the hall, the applause was still going, and along the side wall, the 4 men in black were beginning, very quietly, to close in. The door closed behind her with a soft, expensive click, the kind of sound doors made in buildings that had been built to hold secrets. Malia took 2 steps into the side room and stopped. The room was small, a long mirror on one wall, a velvet bench, a tray with untouched glasses of water. Someone had prepared this room for her earlier, in case the bride needed a moment. She had needed a moment. She had not expected it to be this one. Behind her, the door opened again. Ji-hoon stepped inside and closed it himself. He did not look at her the way a groom looks at a bride who has just walked out of her own vows. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door he is trying to keep shut with his shoulder. He turned the small brass lock. He held his hand there a second longer than he needed to. "Malia." She did not turn. "Look at me." No. The word came out flat. She had used the last of her voice on the question in the hall. What was left in her throat was smaller and older, and did not want to be seen. 3 hours ago, Ji-hoon said, I found out that 2 men are in this hall right now, with orders to take you alive. She heard the sentence. She did not react. Sentences that big did not fit in the body all at once. They came in through the ear and sat somewhere behind the collarbone and waited to be understood. Malia. Say it again. 2 men, guests, in dark suits, They came through the west side of the guest list with forged names. They were placed near the aisle. Their orders are to take you alive during the reception, when the guards rotate. Not me, you. She turned then, slowly. The veil moved with her a second late, like it was hesitating too. Alive, alive. Why? Ji-hoon did not answer right away. He looked at her the way a man looks at the last thing he has to protect in the world. Then he answered, because a dead bride ends a war. A living bride, held somewhere I cannot reach, ends a man. Her hand went to her stomach. It went on its own. She caught it halfway and turned it into a hand smoothing her dress, but he saw. Of course he saw. He had been reading her body since the first night she had ever stepped into a room he was in. Do they know? Only that you are the leverage, not the rest of it. She let out one small breath, not relief, something smaller than relief. A pause between two kinds of fear. Outside the door, in the hall, the applause was still running. It had a strange, thin sound now, heard through the wall. She could hear the pastor coughing quietly into a microphone, trying to hold the room. She could hear Sunmi's voice, high and delighted, performing composure for the guests around her. She could hear glasses being lifted. The wedding was still, absurdly, going on. When, she said. Now. Do-yoon is closing on them now. You knew this at the altar. Yes. You knew this when you took my hand. Yes. You knew this when I asked you if you were marrying me by love or by fear. He did not blink. Yes. And you did not tell me. I could not tell you in front of them. If your face changed, they moved. If they moved during the vows, we lost the shot. I needed them relaxed. I needed you angry at me instead of afraid. She stared at him. Something inside her chest did what floors do in earthquakes. It did not fall. It shifted. All the weight she had been carrying since the service corridor slid 2 feet to the left and settled somewhere she had not built a wall for. It had not been Distem then, in the corridor, when he had said she was going to be the weakest point of the empire. It had not been shame at her. It had been a man telling his soldiers what the enemy already believed, so his soldiers would know where to stand. Say the third sentence, she said. What? In the corridor. This morning, you said 2 things I heard, and 1 I could not. Say the third. He hesitated. He had not expected her to have counted. I said, put 4 men on her that she never sees. If they get within arm's length of her, I do not care about the ceremony. I do not care about the guests. You put them down where they stand. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was the sentence you missed, he said. She sat down, not gracefully. The bench caught her. The dress spread around her in a white pool, and inside the pool her knees were shaking so hard she could see the fabric move. Ji-hoon crossed the room in 3 steps and went down on 1 knee in front of her. Not the wedding kind of knee, the other kind. The kind a man uses when he is trying to be lower than the woman he has hurt. Malia, do not touch me yet. He did not touch her. I am going to be sick, she said, calmly, the way people say things they will not do. Breathe. Do not tell me to breathe. Breathe anyway. She breathed. 1 in, 1 out. The tray of water glasses on the little table caught the light and shook, though nothing had touched it, and she realized after a second that it was her own foot on the floor, tapping without her permission. In her ear, Do-yoon's voice arrived. It arrived through the small silver point in Ji-hoon's collar, faint, but clear enough to hear from where she sat. East 1 is down, no sound. Guests did not see. Ji-hoon's eyes did not leave her face. West, he said, low. Working. She listened. Her own heartbeat was louder than the voice on the wire, but she listened. West 1 is down. Bathroom corridor. He asked for the men's room. We walked him there. Clean. Ji-hoon exhaled once through his nose. That was all he allowed himself. Bring them to the South Service door, wrapped, no blood on the floor, and find the guest lists they came in on. I want to know which name at this table wrote them into the room. Yes, sir. The wire went silent. He looked back at her. They are done, he said. Alive? Alive. I do not kill in the middle of your wedding, Malia. That is one of the things I gave up when I asked you. One of. She wiped a tear off her cheek with the back of her hand. She had not noticed it fall. There will be more then, after tonight. Tonight there will be questions, names, answers, not from me, from Do-yoon, in a room you will never see. And in the hall. In the hall there will be dessert. She almost laughed. She did not laugh, but the sound she made was close. How am I supposed to go back out there? Slowly, on my arm. Do not smile too wide. They will read the wrong thing into it. Just walk. I am wearing a dress that weighs half of me and my legs do not work. Your legs work. They walked you down the aisle. They can walk you back up it. That aisle was easier. That aisle was the worst part, he said. You have done the worst part already. She looked at him. She really looked. The angle of his jaw, the straight line of the black tie, the small vein at his temple that was still, even now, doing whatever it did when he was calm on the outside and calculating on the inside. The dragon on the side of his neck, black and coiled, disappearing into the collar of his white shirt. I hated you in that hall, she said. I know. For a full minute, I thought I had walked into the wrong life. I know. Do not do that to me again. He was silent for a beat. I will not, he said. But there will be nights when I have to make a decision, in the space between 2 seconds, and I will not have time to explain. On those nights, Malia, you have to believe that whatever I choose, I chose it because I want you alive, not because I want you obedient. Alive. That is not a promise. No, it is the shape of the promise. The words come after. She closed her eyes. Inside her ribs, the second heartbeat, the small one, was still there. It had been there all through the corridor, and all through the aisle, and all through the question at the altar. It had not moved. It had not panicked. It had waited. Babies waited, she had read somewhere. They took their signals from the mother's blood, not from the mother's mind. Her blood, right now, was steadier than her mind. That was the thing she noticed. Her body had already decided something her head had not caught up to yet. She opened her eyes. How many, she said. How many what? How many men do you have inside that hall right now, who work for you, and who no one at that table knows about? He almost smiled. He did not. 9, he said. Plus Do-yoon. 9. 2 by the north exit, dressed as waiters. 2 by the south service door. 2 on the mezzanine with the sound crew. 1 at the coat check. 1 in the parking level, at the elevator. 1 in the kitchen, next to the man who has been serving your wine. You have a man next to the man who has been serving your wine. Since the first glass. She stared at him. You did not tell me you were doing that. You did not need to know I was doing that. You needed to walk down the aisle looking like a bride. If you had known, you would have looked at the waiter. If you had looked at the waiter, someone in that room would have looked where you were looking. That is how information leaks. Through the eyes of the person nobody thinks is watching. She thought about that. She thought about it the way you think about a sentence that is going to change how you move through rooms for the rest of your life. I am not a soldier, Ji-hoon. No, you are the reason the soldiers are here. Someone knocked, once, softly, on the door. Ji-hoon's hand went inside his jacket without looking, and stopped there. He did not draw. He waited. Boss? It was Do-yoon. Open. Do-yoon stepped in and closed the door behind him. His hair was a little out of place. There was a smear of something dark on the cuff of his left sleeve. Not blood. coffee, maybe. He was carrying 2 folded pieces of paper. He did not look at Malia. He was the kind of man who did not look at a bride whose composure was still forming. He was giving her the room to build her face back. Guest lists, he said. The 2 names they used, Han Jun-woo, Lee Tae-min, neither name is real. Both are on the confirmed side of the ledger. Someone at the family table signed them in. Ji-hoon took the paper, he read. Whose handwriting? That is the interesting part, sir. Ji-hoon looked up. It is your sister's. There was a long second in the room where no one said anything. Malia's hand, on its own, went back to her stomach. This time, she did not catch it in time. Do-yoon's eyes flicked down, flicked up. He did not say a word. He put the second sheet of paper into Ji-hoon's other hand and stepped back 1 pace, the way a soldier steps back after handing a weapon to a superior. Where is she? Ji-hoon said. At the family table, talking to the ambassador's wife. Very charming. Do not touch her. Sir, do not touch her, Do-yoon. Not tonight. Tonight she does not know we know. Tonight she smiles and toasts and cuts cake. I want 24 hours of her not knowing. In 24 hours she will make a phone call, and that phone call will hand me the man on the other end. Are we clear? Very clear, sir. And the 2. Wrapped. South service door, breathing. Keep them breathing. I want the names of everyone in their line up to a room in Busan. I already know the address of. Do-yoon nodded once and left. The door closed. Malia was staring at the wall, not at any particular point on it, at the flat, expensive, empty surface where nothing had been hung, because rooms like this were designed to hold nothing but the moment. Your sister, she said. Yes. Signed them in. Yes. To take me. Yes. Did she know it was to take me alive, or does she think it is to take me at all? Ji-hoon did not answer for a moment. She thinks it is to take you at all, he said. She does not know about the child. She thinks that if you disappear tonight, I break, and if I break, the seat is empty, and if the seat is empty, a certain man in Busan sits in it, and she rises with him. She is your sister. She is my sister. She was in my room this morning. She stood next to me at the mirror. She whispered in my ear. What did she say? Malia's throat worked once. She said I would never really be a Kang. Ji-hoon closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them again, the temperature in the room had changed. Not louder, not colder, just changed. The way a room changes when a man decides something he cannot undo. You are a Kang, he said. You are the only Kang in this building right now who did not sign that name into a killing. That is a low bar. It is the bar tonight. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. It was not a laugh. It was the sound air makes when it comes out of a body that has been holding it since a corridor that morning. He stood up. He held out his hand. Not yet, she said. He let his hand hang there. I need 1 minute. Take it. She took it. She took it in silence, sitting on the velvet bench in the small room with the untouched water and the mirror and the doorknob that had a lock in it, staring at nothing, letting the size of the thing settle into her body 1 inch at a time. She thought about her mother. She thought about the small brown hand of her mother braiding her hair when she was 7 and saying, "One day, girl, you are going to walk into a room full of people who did not know your grandmothers, and you are going to have to be your own grandmother in that room. Be her." She had thought, at 7, that her mother was talking about being brave. She understood now that her mother had been talking about being witnessed alone. She stood up. The dress moved with her. Ji-hoon. Yes. When we walk out of this door, I do not want you to look at your sister. I was not planning to. I want you to look at me, only at me, the whole way back down that aisle. If your eyes leave my face 1 time, she reads it, and if she reads it, she runs, and if she runs, We lose her. Look at me. His mouth did the small thing that was almost a smile. That was not going to be difficult. Do not flatter me. Not now. That was not flattery. She almost smiled back. She did not quite. She did something better. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin 1 degree and let the veil settle behind her, the way a veil settles when a bride has decided to become a wife on her own terms. "Open the door," she said. He turned the small brass lock. He put his hand on the handle. He waited. "On my arm," she said. "On your arm." He opened the door. The sound of the hall came in at them like a wave, applause finally dying, chatter rising in its place, someone somewhere calling for the toast, and behind all of that, invisible to every guest at every table, the quiet, professional, unhurried footsteps of 9 men and Do-yoon rearranging themselves around a bride whose sister-in-law had just signed her death warrant in the guest book. Malia walked out into it, her hand on his arm, her chin exactly where she had put it, her second heartbeat, small and stubborn and unafraid, walking with her. Halfway back to the aisle, without turning her head, without moving her lips, she said, very softly so that only he could hear, "After tonight, you are going to tell me everything." "Yes. Everything, Ji-hoon. Yes. And then we are going to decide, together, what kind of house our child is going to grow up in." He did not answer for 3 steps. Then he did. Yes. They reached the aisle. The guests turned. Sunmi's smile was already in place. Mireille's smile was already in place. The ambassador's wife was already lifting her glass. Somewhere in the room, wrapped in canvas behind a service door, 2 men were breathing shallow, careful breaths and thinking about a room in Busan they were never going to see again. Malia looked straight ahead. She did not look at Mireille. She did not look at Sunmi. She looked at the empty space at the altar where the pastor was waiting, with a face that was trying very hard to be a face at a wedding. She walked toward it. And behind her, half a step back, Ji-hoon Kang, boss of the Kang clan, 32 years old, dragon on his neck, 1 hand on his bride's arm, kept his eyes exactly where she had told him to keep them, and did not look, not even once, at his sister. Malia did not move for 2 full breaths. She stood in the center of the aisle with the bouquet lowered against her thigh, the veil still resting along her spine, and she looked at Ji-hoon, the way a woman looks at a man she is about to either forgive or bury. The salon behind her had gone still. Not silent, still. There is a difference. Silent is when nobody talks. Still is when nobody dares to move a finger, because the wrong movement might tell the wrong person where to look. Ji-hoon took 1 step forward, only 1. He kept his hands where she could see them. "Say it again," she said. Her voice did not rise. "Not for them, for me." He heard the instruction. He obeyed the instruction. "You are the only person alive," he said, "capable of making me let go of blood, of power, of revenge." The words fell into the room without ornament. He did not raise his chin to sell them. He did not soften his mouth to prove them. He said them the way a man reads a debt he intends to pay. Malia felt the sentence land somewhere below her ribs, in the exact spot where she had been carrying the secret for 11 weeks, and she understood, in that instant, that the sentence had been true before he had learned how to say it. Behind Ji-hoon, near the 3rd row, Mireille's hand tightened on the small gold clutch. It was a small tightening. A stranger would not have seen it. Malia saw it. Ji-hoon had, in fact, seen it 3 seconds earlier, in the reflection off the glass panel behind the altar, and had chosen not to turn his head. Do-yoon had already turned his. He did not stare. He simply positioned his shoulders half a degree toward the 3rd row and let the 2 men behind Junwoo and Taemin understand. Through the language shoulders speak among people who have worked together a long time, that the distance between Mireille and the nearest exit had just been closed. Madame Hayrin, in the front pew, folded her hands in her lap. She had been folding her hands in her lap for 74 years. She was very good at it, but this time she folded them in a specific arrangement, right hand over left, thumb tucked, and Do-yoon, without looking at her, registered the sign. The old woman knew. The old woman had known for at least a week. Ji-hoon had not been told that his grandmother had run her own quiet audit of the guest list, and it was better, tonight, that he keep not knowing. Sunmi's face was another kind of pale. She was staring at her son the way a mother stares at a stranger she once carried in her body. Her mouth was closed. Her mouth being closed was, for Sunmi, a form of violence. Malia let the bouquet fall a little lower against her thigh. She adjusted the weight in her feet. She did not step toward Ji-hoon yet. She had one more thing to say, and she needed to say it upright. "There is something you don't know," she said. Ji-hoon did not answer. He did not push. He had learned, in 8 months of watching this woman, that when Malia decided to speak, the correct response of the room was to become the room for her. She lifted her right hand. She placed her palm flat against the low curve of her stomach, over the heavy silk. She kept it there. She did not press. Pressing would have been a performance. She simply rested her hand where her hand had been resting, in private, every morning since the 2nd week of March. "We are already 3, she said. The words traveled the length of the aisle without help. There was a small sound in the front pew, a single, involuntary inhalation. It came from Madame Hayrin, and it was not surprise. It was recognition. Something the old woman had suspected in the tea room 3 Sundays ago and had chosen, out of respect, not to name. Sunmi's hand rose halfway to her throat and stopped. Her fingers curled inward, into the pearls, and did not close on them. Her lips parted a 1/4 of an inch. She caught the movement before it became a word. The word she had almost said was in Korean, and it was ugly, and Malia, who had spent 9 months studying the shape of ugly words in that language, understood the beginning of it anyway. Sunmi understood that Malia had understood. The mother-in-law's chin lowered a fraction. It was not an apology. It was, for the first time in 8 months, a silence chosen instead of a weapon. Murray did not empty, Murray filled. Whatever color had been leaving her face rushed back into it in a red that did not belong to a wedding. She took half a step backward. The gold clutch slipped in her hand, and she caught it against her hip. Do-yoon's second man, without turning, closed the last inch of the space behind her. Ji-hoon looked at Malia. He did not look at her hand on her stomach. He looked at her eyes. He wanted her to know that he had heard the sentence about the child, but that he was answering, first, the question she had asked 10 minutes earlier, whether he was marrying her out of love or out of fear of losing her as an asset. "Then everything I said," he told her, "counts for 3. Malia felt something behind her sternum give way, quietly, the way a door gives way when the hand on it is finally the right one. She did not cry. She had cried enough that morning, in the suite, with Madame Hayrin's fingers on her jaw. What she did was breathe out, once, fully, and take the single step that closed the distance between her and the altar. She lifted the bouquet, laid it across her left arm, and offered him her right hand. He took it. His palm was dry. His thumb settled on the small bone at the base of her thumb the way a man settles a signature. Around them, the salon began to remember how to breathe. The officiant, a small silver-haired man who had, until that moment, been a piece of furniture in a robe, cleared his throat once and lifted the leather folder. He did not attempt any of the language he had prepared. He simply asked, in Korean and then in English, whether the bride and groom consented, before this house, to the union that had been declared. Ji-hoon said the word. Malia said the word. The officiant closed the folder. He did not read the rest. Everyone in the room, including the officiant, understood that whatever was written after the word had already been said, out loud, in front of the entire clan, by both of them, in their own language. Ji-hoon slid the ring onto her finger. His hand was steady. She slid the ring onto his. Hers was steadier. He did not lift her veil for a public kiss. That kind of gesture belonged to another kind of wedding. He lowered his forehead against hers, briefly, and said something into the space between their mouths that only she heard. She nodded once. Then he stepped back, kept her hand in his, and turned toward the room. Do-yoon had already begun to move. He did not walk fast. He walked at the exact speed a best man walks toward the champagne tower. He crossed the aisle at a diagonal, passed the third row without eye contact, and by the time he reached Jun-woo, he was smiling the small, official smile of a man about to escort a guest to a phone call. Jun-woo felt the hand close around his upper arm before he heard the words. The words, when they came, were gentle. "Your driver is at the side entrance," Do-yoon said in Korean. "He says it is urgent." Jun-woo's face did not change. He understood, in that second, that he had lost. He also understood that if he made any of the noises a man like him could make in a room like this, he would not reach the side entrance alive. He stood. He nodded to Malia and Ji-hoon with the correct depth. He allowed himself to be escorted. 20 seconds later, Taemin was escorted through the opposite door in the same manner, by a man with a jade cufflink and a scar over his eyebrow. Neither of them ever reached a driver. They reached, instead, a service corridor Malia had walked past that morning, without knowing what she was walking past. They reached 2 chairs. They reached a very quiet conversation with Do-yoon that produced, within 11 minutes, the full names of the 3 Park cousins who had authorized the operation, the location of the second team parked 6 blocks away, and the burner number that had been used to receive Murray's confirmation at 9:47 that morning. Nobody in the salon knew any of this yet. The salon was busy standing up. The salon was busy making the sounds a salon makes when a wedding has, against expectation, taken place. Malia and Ji-hoon walked back down the aisle together. He kept her hand on the inside of his elbow. She kept her chin at the exact angle she had learned from Madame Hae-rin at 7 that morning. When they passed the third row, Mireille was no longer in it. Mireille had been guided, by 2 women in long black dresses and pearl earrings, toward a small private lounge at the rear of the salon, on the pretense of touching up a smudge in her lipstick. Mireille understood, halfway there, what the small private lounge actually was. She did not scream. She had been raised in the same house as Ji-hoon. Screaming was for people who still believed screaming worked. She sat down when she was asked to sit down. She waited. Madame Hae-rin arrived 4 minutes later, alone, and closed the door behind her. The old woman did not sit. She stood in front of her granddaughter and looked at her for a long moment with the particular gaze of a person who has been observing a specific kind of decay for a specific number of years and has, until tonight, chosen to hope. "You gave them the seating chart," Madame Hae-rin said, in Korean, without inflection. "You gave them the service entrance. You gave them the timing of the vows." Mireille's mouth opened. "Do not," her grandmother said. Mireille's mouth closed. Madame Hae-rin set a small, folded piece of paper on the low table between them. She did not push it forward. She simply set it down. "There is a car," she said. "It will take you to Incheon. There is an apartment in a city I will not name. There is an allowance. Your name will remain on the family register because removing it would announce what you did, and this family does not announce what it does. You will not attend a Kang funeral. You will not attend a Kang wedding. You will not attend a Kang birth. If you approach any member of this house within 100 meters, the allowance ends the same afternoon, and other arrangements begin." Mireille looked at the paper. She looked at her grandmother. She understood, for the first time in 28 years, that she had never been the second child of this house. She had been an audit her grandmother had been quietly running for a long time. "Grandmother," she began. Take the paper, Madame Hayrin said. Mirai took the paper. The old woman turned and left the lounge without looking back. She rejoined the reception in the main salon within 90 seconds, and by the time she reached the head table, she was smiling the small, correct smile of a matriarch whose evening had gone exactly the way she had intended. The reception itself was short. Ji-hoon did not want a long reception. He wanted his wife off the ground floor of a public building. 2 toasts were made. Sun-mi did not offer one. Sun-mi sat at the head table, ate 3 bites of the first course, and, when the cake was cut, walked over to Malia and stopped a foot away. She did not embrace her. Embracing was not in her vocabulary tonight. She lowered her head, a small bow, precise, the depth a Korean mother-in-law offers the mother of her first grandchild. Malia returned the bow, the exact depth, not deeper, not shallower. Sun-mi walked away. It was not affection. It was, for the first time, acknowledgement. Malia understood that this was the most she was going to get from that woman, and she understood, also, that it was enough. An hour later, Ji-hoon led her out through the private terrace on the 4th floor. The night over Seoul was the color of wet ink. The city sat below them in slow, indifferent light, the river a slower black inside the black. He stood behind her with one hand on her waist, and the other flat over the hand she had rested, again, on her stomach. "I owe you a full account," he said in English, quiet, close to her ear. "Not tonight. Tonight I owe you sleep, but an account is owed." She nodded. "There is a thing," he said, "I have been building for 2 years, a way out of half of what I do, the clean half of the businesses, ports, 2 hotels, a logistics group in Busan. Enough to keep a family, not enough to keep a throne. And the other half? The other half," he said, "stays where it is until the people I am afraid of are dead or exiled. That may take 3 years, that may take 5. And in 3 years? In 3 years, he said, I hand it to Do-yoon, or to whoever Do-yoon has trained by then, and I stop being the man on the neck of it." Malia was quiet for a long time. The wind on the terrace lifted a single strand of her hair against her cheekbone, and she did not push it back. "You will not lie to me about the middle," she said. "No. You will not put a guard on me I do not know is there. No. And if it comes for us, he said, I burn it. All of it. If this empire ever has to fall to protect the 2 of you, it falls." She turned in his arms. She looked at him from a distance of 6 inches, and she did not smile, because smiling was not the right instrument for that sentence. She placed her palm flat over his heart, over the black lapel, over the small silver pin of the clan. "Then you are already richer tonight," she said, "than you were yesterday." He held her there. The city held them both. 3 weeks later, in the garden of the Kang estate, a walled garden of black pines and white gravel, and 1 old plum tree that had been planted the year Madame Hayrin was born, Malia walked the gravel path with her hand loose in her husband's, and the beginning of a curve visible under the loose linen of a summer dress. Madame Hayrin sat on the stone bench under the plum tree, teacup between her hands, and watched them come. She did not stand. Standing was for people who still had to prove things. "The child," she said when they reached her, "will be born in the 3rd week of the autumn." "How do you know?" Malia asked. The old woman smiled. It was a very small smile. It contained, without effort, 7 decades. "I know," she said. Malia sat down beside her on the bench. Ji-hoon remained standing, one hand on his wife's shoulder, and looked out over the wall at the low ridge of the hills beyond the estate. Somewhere on the other side of those hills, in a country neither of them would name that night, Mireille was learning to live inside a small apartment with a name that was not entirely hers. Somewhere in a room in the southern half of the city, Do-yoon was closing the last of the 3 files opened after the wedding. Somewhere behind a lacquered door on the second floor of the estate, Sun Mi was drafting, in her own hand, a letter she had not written in 20 years, a letter to her mother-in-law, which began with the single word she had been unable to say in the salon. Malia felt her husband's hand tighten a quarter of an inch on her shoulder. She reached up and covered it with hers. She did not say anything. She had spent the last 3 weeks learning how much could be said, in this house, without speaking. Madame Heyrin poured a second cup of tea and set it in front of her granddaughter-in-law, green, unsweetened, the exact temperature it needed to be. Malia lifted the cup. She drank. She looked at the plum tree, which had bloomed and unbloomed 100 times in this garden, and was, by any measure that mattered, older than the empire her husband had spent the last decade running. She thought about the thin line she had walked that morning of the wedding, from the suite to the aisle to the altar, and about the fragment of overheard conversation that had almost ended her before the vows began, and about the truth, which had been 3 sentences long and had been meant, all along, to keep her alive. She set the cup down. She placed her hand, again, over the small curve under the linen. "Say it one more time," she said, without turning her head. Ji-hoon knew which sentence she meant. "If this empire ever has to fall to protect the 2 of you," he said, "it falls." Malia closed her eyes. She let the sentence rest against her skin the way a ring rests on a finger, warm and permanent and not for show. Then she opened her eyes, looked at her grandmother-in-law, and smiled the smile of a woman who had, finally, been called by her name in her own house. The wind moved once through the plum tree. A single white petal fell into the untouched tea and floated there, small and stubborn and entirely at home. She did not fish it out. She let it stay. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever heard a fragment of a conversation and built a whole betrayal in your head, only to discover later that the same voice was trying to protect you? Have you ever walked into a room full of people who saw you as an outsider and chose to stand tall anyway? Have you ever carried a secret inside your body while everyone around you decided your worth without asking? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, protection, and hidden truths, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.